worries. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for October 3rd, 2023. And on our agenda this evening, we have more budget review. Tonight we are doing streets, engineering, stormwater, parking, and transportation.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to take that as a cue to get started. We just want to put up, as a follow-up from last night, the supplementals that were presented last night, and just make sure, one, we've captured them all, and two, if they're, let you know what we're going to do with these. So PTO versus credit time, that is something that I was directed to take offline with Bill directly, and we'll do that with Courtney and myself. And then the equity and accessibility roadmap, that again is just a request. Why don't we do a little better narrowing council versus individual requests going forward, okay? This one's also a follow-up with Bill to send him some links of some of these that exist in other communities. The next one, motor vehicle sales tax versus use tax, which needs to be a council-driven directive for policy change. We'll get you an info only on what it is. And you can decide if you want to move that into work session. And then there was a request for also an info only about food tax refunds in the past years. We've dropped it on the screen just to find out if this is sufficient information or if you want us to write a full info only memo. So you can see it's about maybe 20% of the population, year-round population, that takes advantage of it.
Yeah, it definitely fluctuates year over year, as do the total dollar amounts that are ultimately awarded. It'll depend on the mix of how many seniors we have at times. It'll depend on, we give an additional amount for folks that have, I think it's blind and potentially disabled individuals as well get an additional amount. So it ebbs and flows. We've actually tried to assess, during COVID, we thought we would really experience a bigger pullback than what we did, just due to some complexities. We did open it longer, accepted applications beyond the initial end date by another 2 weeks to kind of help with that issue, but it kind of goes up and down. But
is there a budget for it?
Yeah,
yes.
It's in council's base budget.
So actually the council pays the senior awards, and the regular awards comes out of the three predominant tax funds that participate in the tax collection side.
Pete, could you refresh us on what the genesis of this refund was? And
it was when was it the 1 cent tax was passed back in the 70s. That part of the deal with the voters was to initiate a refund mechanism for local participants that would have to pay the tax as well. And so again, that lasted for decades without any adjustment. And then in I want to say 2018, somewhere in there, we made an adjustment for an additional 10% on the base amount. So,
okay, so
but the intention was never to be a full refund, and recognizing that there's local contribution also required for goods and services. So it was focused specifically only on a food component, and a component not to fully refund the food cost of an individual, because what percentage of their grocery shopping is likely happening within our city limits versus other locations.
50, okay, this is the food where are these numbers? I don't understand how there's hundreds of thousands of dollars going on here.
So one individual could get $165 if they qualify for the three different criteria. So your base amount, you could be a senior and you get an additional 55. And then you could also have a blind disabled component, and so you get another 55. That's one individual. Multiple households have multiple individuals in them, so we ultimately run into situations where we'll cut a check for 3 or 4 individuals per household.
The information I'd be curious about is the total awards divided by whatever the budget is for this each year. And what I would want to get at is just, can we responsibly expand upon this and have it to be a greater dollar amount?
It'll be your choice amongst the use of your fund balance and the impacted sales tax funds. So your kids' first housing fund, your general sales tax, and your transportation sales tax.
Parks and open space.
Oh,
and
yes, sorry, and Parks and Open Space, how they're structured. So what we do is a true-up in fall supplemental of what's in the base budget, and if it goes over that, based upon the current award amounts, the number of applicants, we just have you do a true-up allocation as a technical adjustment.
So you can see in 2023, there was about $200,000 in total that went out the door for this program. So we try to estimate the $200,000 best we can as we're setting the budget. And as Sarah says, if it grossly goes over that, we would potentially come back and say, let's add additional amounts so that we can fully fund what the expenditures were. Grossly over that number is maybe an extra $30,000. You know, it's a 15% increase on the number, but it's not going to make or break the organization. So, I mean, your base number right now that you're working with is about $200,000 for the existing program. So if you doubled the rebate, you could just probably safely assume 400,000. You might even see a little bit more because maybe you might attract a little bit more participation from folks. They might say, that's a bigger number, it's worth my time, that kind of thing.
I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about what the original math was. So the refund came with the original tax, right?
It's not in the ballot language. It was a promise made in placing the ballot question, is my recollection of how that happened. It's been a long time since I've read these, I would say the note-taking at that time was quite different than what we do today in its specificity. But so there's never been a specific formula applied. What has been is we've never been asked, nor would I suggest we go and try to estimate what an average person's Aspen grocery bill spend is in a year. I think it fluctuates greatly. And it will fluctuate even more greatly now with the alcohol sales at grocery stores, and whether we should be, refunding at what percentage of those totals. It is just a math exercise that we don't think we can have good data to present you to do that. So it has been a lot more of, there's a few advocates for this going up. Most of the community has appreciated recognition, though, of maybe they don't need to contribute quite so much on this essential need while residing here.
All right, well, I know we got a lot to cover tonight, but I guess to answer your direct first question, do we need more info on this? For me, yes. I'd like to learn a little bit more about the original intent, and that way I'd be able to either support or not support a higher amount.
So if the council wishes, I can pull back the last memo we did when we made the last adjustment. That'll probably have a decent amount of history, and that might be an easy thing to grab to provide the council.
I think just reissue that.
That'd be great.
And then maybe just a cover that has this table on it again.
Yep.
With the more current numbers.
Thanks.
And just one more thing to add with that is when we have like things like this and they stay at the same amount every year and inflation goes up, I always feel like at minimum it should go up with the consumer price index, rounded up to the nearest like 5, so that it's like a normal number still rather than like at the pennies. But something that actually like goes up with inflation and the consumer price index makes a lot of sense for me, rather than have it just be less every year because everything costs more and it stays the same.
So that's a good point, and I believe when we see the memo from, I think it was 2018, there was a discussion about having an escalator, and it didn't carry, but.
Yeah, that could be part of some memo about having an escalation. Like I said, the only detraction from this in my mind is if we're eating away at other other things that we need, but otherwise I feel like this would be a great thing to do, so.
So we will provide that information and rely on all of you to bring it back about whether it gets scheduled for a work session in the future.
Thank you.
So Bill will be there.
Okay, so here's a recap of the supplemental requests. We just want to follow up if any of these, the straw poll, if a majority of you wish to have any of these polled for future discussion by the council as you finish up your budget process. These are all the supplementals that were presented to you last night as part of that $3 million new ask package.
I think for me, the only one would be that $75,000 one-time comprehensive accessibility and equity roadmap.
So okay, so that's a little different than what you said last night. So I just want to confirm it's that and not the HHS capacity building, which is, we heard from you at the end of last night's meeting.
They were,
Under the mayor and
where is
council.
that?
Under
Oh,
the
on
mayor
the
and
right.
council.
I'm sorry, the amounts threw me off being the same. Yes, that's the one I'm more interested in
Okay,
discussing.
so I'm just,
HHS grants.
the capacity building one and specifically that supplemental, and so.
Thanks for that, Sarah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure, and just so we're aware, procedurally, the mayor will call for a straw poll to see if there's a majority of you that wish to support a discussion. Supporting a discussion doesn't mean you've made a decision, a personal decision about whether it's included or not. However, if there is something that you're contemplating that you would like to see removed, I would encourage you to raise it for discussion so that your fellow counselors can be aware that a discussion will be scheduled for it. Otherwise, we're going to continue the behind-the-scenes work to close out the general fund as soon as we get it done, because it's a bit of a beast to get into its final form.
So which one were you?
Mayor and
HHS?
council, $75,000 one-time grants program, health and human services capacity building.
Right.
And to refresh you, last night I was sort of just like, why are we responsible for digging into the minutia of where these nonprofits need our help most? Feels a little intrusive to me. I don't know if that's the right word, maybe a little detailed. Like I'm not arguing against supporting nonprofits, don't get me wrong. It just feels like maybe we're spending too much time and effort on trying to tell them how they need our help.
Sir, could I ask a question on that? Was that part of helping nonprofits in some of the perhaps bookkeeping or management programs that they don't have expertise in?
Sure, it's helping them figuring out really a resiliency plan. One of the ongoing goals of the city's grants has always never been, has been for any organization not to be so fully dependent on the city's funding that they can't operate, and therefore they should be thinking independent from the city. What we're hearing with these grants, people are asking, particularly the executive directors, are asking for help and with a third-party facilitator and educator to help them through governance issues. So this is not city staff doing this work. We provide a funding conduit and a selection conduit. So they elect to apply for this grant with it's got a cap of $25,000 on it per entity. Sometimes we can get 4 entities for $75,000, depending upon what they're looking for. But typically, they use it for some strategic planning. Typically, we've seen in this first year pilot, they're looking for example, best practices in financial management. So everything from their cash handling policies to their investment policies that they're looking for support on having some expert eyes on, because perhaps their board doesn't contain those expertise. These are health and human service nonprofits, generally are the ones with the smallest endowments, if they have an endowment at all, right? So that's why this is really limited to the services of taking care of the locals of the valley and its focus, rather than on the visitor population or in services that would serve both visitors and locals. It's you know, and I'll give you an example of one of our grantees this year is Alpine Legal Services. So Alpine Legal Services provides free or low-cost legal assistance and in times mediation support, and is there to support individuals perhaps as they're going through a first-time judicial process for actions that may have occurred or potentially viewed as willful ignorance, They've stepped in landlord-tenant mediations, services like that. So they feel like they're pretty good, and we provide them financial support on that front-end programming. But what they didn't have is a strategic plan to help them figure out, how do we increase our reserves? So how do they reimagine their development services component of their operation and clarify what's the role of a governing body member versus a staff member in that work? And how do they develop a strategic plan around that? So they've gone through that process. They're pretty excited. They're working on implementing that strategic plan between the board, as a partnership between the board and the staff team now. And we have 2 other nonprofits right now who are going through this with the third-party vendor the city selected for this service.
All sounds great and well-intentioned. It's just, again, it seems bizarre to me in a way that the city is getting that involved in these nonprofits. Like, the alternative would be to just give them unrestricted funds for local health and human services things and tell them they can spend it on what they want, including capacity building.
Sure, that's not how the council set up that grant program. It has metrics that are required on performance to the community attached to those dollars, and that is one of the best practice recommendations from B4. Is it 4B? I always forget which one goes first. But our counselors who've been here for a while have met with them 2 or 3 times and trying to make some of those tough decisions about how those dollars are directed. So, I mean, at this point, Mr. Mayor, I would just turn it over to you about whether, we've already had a pretty lengthy discussion here, whether this straw polls for further, or if a majority of council would like to see the supplemental continue.
Yeah, so I'm looking around the table. Bill has questions around the 75,000. Does anybody else want to continue that conversation?
I went through it, and I'm comfortable the money is well spent, and I would see if we can get some background information to Bill for that, and if that doesn't satisfy him, to come back again and revisit it. But I think maybe if Bill has some of the background of the intentions, that it might give him a little bit different insight.
Sam or John?
I support sending the supplementals forward.
Okay,
Yeah, same as what Ward said.
we're in support of it.
Great. Thanks for considering, everybody.
Sure, there's an info-only memo, I think about this program about 45 days ago, so we'll also reissue that to you. That has the background information and what's going on with the current program.
Are there any other items from counselors that you wish to have further discussion about? All right, let's get on to our agenda for today.
For Ward, we put this slide up.
Now, Pete, now you're
I
working.
know, I gotta-
Now you're working.
Gotta rise to the occasion, right?
All right. So with that, we'll begin with streets.
Hello, Council. I'm Daniel Maldonado, the Superintendent for Streets Department.
Nice to see you.
You too?
Hi.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Jerry was a great guy. We can go ahead and start. Oh, actually, sorry, go back there, please.
All right.
Yeah.
No, you're good.
All right. Streets is a customer service-oriented department. Our operations focus on infrastructure and maintenance on the community's travel corridors, which allows for a safe, lived-in community of choice. Our operations are highly focused on the efficiency of resources, which allows the department to protect the environment. The proactive nature of our streets operations allows other community functions to occur without interruption. Outside of maintaining our physical streets, our focus is keeping our streets and stormwater systems clean. Our sweeping and vacuum operations allow us to maintain our air and water quality levels. We removed over 300 tons of sediment and debris from the streets, vaults, and inlets These operations are an important collaboration between Streets and the Stormwater program. Streets had its challenges in the last year with staffing shortages, and to overcome this issue, we needed to do more with less, and that meant creating a new dynamic with current staff to figure out operational efficiencies to maintain the level of service we've always provided. As an example, we prioritized the downtown core and deployed the graders more frequently than in years past. Also, we were more strategic on our application for de-icer to the roads by using sand counters to measure more precisely, resulting in lower cost and less sediment in the streets. Last year, I emphasized cross-training my staff. With multiple vacancies in our department, we needed to think about future and how we can recruit and maintain staff in the longer term. We began to think about how we can leverage cross-training and keep our staff engaged and allow individuals to fill multiple roles when needed. We think this model will be beneficial to our future operations. Moving forward, I'm looking at how we can plan our operations for future and long-term viability. Currently, I'm assessing department roles for potential restructure. I plan to reach out to other streets departments to get their advice on how their department is structured and to learn more about best practices in alignment with a smart customer-focused government. Another project this year is to collaborate with Pickens County on our snow storage and snow hauling that fits our operational needs. Excuse me. My objective is to be more efficient in our snow removal process and to uncover more storage opportunities. In order to manage expectations of when and how streets are cleared after a snow event, we want to share information to our customers because we want everyone who lives and works in Aspen to know how and when our snow removal operations occur. For example, we collaborated with our GIS team this summer to develop a mapping system of all of our snow removal operations, and we plan to partner with communications office to share out these maps as well as our de-icer and our snow removal operating procedures. And we often have these types of questions from our community, and this will help us be more proactive going forward.
Street structure, as you can see, those are the programs supported by the 12.05 FTE in streets. The two largest being maintenance and repair and snow and ice removal. So those are our heavy equipment operators and mechanics that are working year-round to keep the fleet and streets safe and clean. On the expense side, about 60% is personnel services or labor cost. And then looking at their financials, Streets does have a small revenue stream made up of the state highway contract, Colorado highway user tax, and the city's share of the county road and bridges tax. And then again, on the operating side, roughly 85% there is fleet and streets management. And as we go through these, I'll just point out, I saw some of you flipping through your larger council books. Tab 8 has all the financial details, so we can kind of point those out as we get to future sections as well.
For our 2024 fleet replacement plan, we have 12 vehicles on the replacement schedule. The street sweeper and the snow blower are our biggest purchases for next year.
And again, I'll point out in tab 5 under capital, there is the detailed fleet sheet if you're interested in the current vehicles being replaced.
Daniel and Matt, are all vehicles under the streets department? Is that why we're looking at stuff from the police department and other
That's
things?
the total is listed there, yes.
And just to add to that, this is all of the general fund fleet shown here. Some of the other fleet for like the utilities departments and things like that are actually itemized within those funds as well, because they're the payers of those vehicle replacements.
Thank you for clarity.
So like in transportation, I think do we have, if we have questions about the vehicle replacement, should we talk about it now or during transportation?
In the transportation fund.
Okay.
Small capital.
Thanks for getting that bright screen back on.
Okay, yeah, and then this small capital maintenance, again, facility upkeep and stewardship of our assets. Questions?
Go for it, Bill.
I have a bit of an off-topic question, but Daniel, nice to meet you, first of all.
too.
Thank you for all you do. Is there anything, I guess particularly related to like snow and ice removal, that you wish you could do better, but there's certain policies in the cities that prevent you from doing as good of a job as you'd like to be able to do?
Currently, right now, I don't have an answer to that. From my experience, as just an employee there, I don't think there's much more that we could do to better it. I think we're doing the best we can with what we got, and that's the best I can do for you right now.
Okay, think about it, and
Okay.
always feel free to communicate. The thing that
Yeah.
sort of like comes to mind to me, and there's reasons for it, is like we use mag chloride in Pickens County, right, on the roads instead of salt.
Right.
And mag chloride has advantages and disadvantages, and I think I think there's probably, for every person who loves it, there's someone who hates it, right? So that was where my head was going. But if you have something that ever comes to mind, like I wish we could make the streets a lot less icy if we were allowed to do blank, I'd love to hear about it.
So we'll reissue the memo on mag chloride for you. We did a trial of that starting in 2021, and it was approved for council for specific routes, typically that are bus traveled, as the limitation because of the impacts on water quality in the Roaring Fork. But we can pull that old memo. The other thing I would just say here is that one of the challenges, quite frankly, is parking. That is one of the biggest challenges this department faces in snow removal as a problem. And so there's certainly some things you'll see us do, like we're, again, this winter going to be upping no overnight parking in the core. And it'll upset some people because even we'll have to tow some cars. And it might have been because people made the most responsible choice because of their intoxication. But we have some ways to work through that. But this team has extremely large equipment that is very difficult to maneuver here in the mountains. One other thing he didn't take advantage of, but I'm going to bring it up, is this department is struggling significantly with staffing. Their vacancies with qualified CDL drivers and heavy equipment operators, and this is because it's one of the most competitive segments of the market right now for employment between here and Parachute.
On the topic of de-icing, I think a couple of years ago when we had it on the rafter route, and I think there was a water sampling there up out of town before the stormwater drainage, and then a little bit downstream. And as I recall, there was not a noticeable degradation in the water quality. And I think also that we had a whole list of maybe 10 different substances, all the way from beet juice to salt, to use as a de-icer. And if we could have a refresher, I don't think it was mag chloride that we wound up using, or mag chloride entirely, but I know from some of the bus drivers last year, they felt as though the de-icer on the rafter routes weren't as good as they had been in the previous year.
Okay, yeah, the de-icer, that seemed to work the best for us over the last couple of years. I haven't heard that from RAFTA yet, which that would have been nice to know, just to maybe get a different type of mixture for salt. So
Well, was it mag chloride or was it something else?
The de-icer,
Yes.
it was salt. I will look into that as what that salt is mixed with, but,
And was it the same last year as the year before?
yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Following up on something Sarah said, Daniel, how much more efficient could your snow removal operations be if you had your own tow truck?
If I had staffing, it would be great. But I don't even have the staffing to
Plow the streets.
plow the streets right now, like we have in the past. We're down 7 people, so it's gonna be a struggle this year.
Okay, so hopefully that's a temporary
Yeah.
issue for you, and hopefully you have, hopefully for all of our sakes, you have good luck filling some of those positions in the near term. But let's think about it in like a typical year. I genuinely don't know the answer here, so I'm wondering, like, is this something that's a minor inconvenience that someone has to go around 1 or 2 cars while they're plowing a street, or is it something like you can only do half as good of a job because there's people parked all over the place? I just have no sense of how big of an impediment the parking is. Like, I mean, Sarah said it's a big issue, so I believe it's big. I just don't know how big.
It's pretty big. It's a huge safety concern for one. We can't plow the streets near as good as we should be right now. If we had our own tow truck, that would be beneficial. I know in the past, we have had towing in the Corps at those times, and our streets were in much better condition.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
mean,
the
I
thing
know
is
from
tow trucks
personal
are
experience.
available when you call them at 2 in the morning.
They are?
Yeah, if we want Shane's here at the 2 in the morning and it's winter season, Shane's is gonna show up. It's a profitable time to do business. They're just, I mean, unless it's the middle of a freak storm that they're pulling people out of ditches, they're not getting other calls.
Got it.
So
Yeah, I mean,
there's
my
a,
experience in getting tow trucks in the valley has been like really difficult, so maybe that's part of where this idea is coming from. But if you guys like this idea, you know, this doesn't need to happen for this year, but I would maybe suggest getting together with parking. And if it's something that would really help in multiple areas of the city, I'm open to exploring it. Doesn't need to happen this year.
yeah, and the parking department helps a lot with the towing needs, actually, of the streets department, so they can stay focused on clearing streets as that goes forward. And just to clarify, it is mag chloride that we are using, so we do have that additive on the salt. And I think the other part of the conversation we shouldn't forget is how much sand we're putting down and small rock in this town. It is, to me, almost frightening the amount of it we use, because that's also eventually making its way through the stormwater system to the river. Obviously, less impacts, but it's how it affects the longevity or lack thereof on the infrastructure of underground pipes that transport that sand through water flows is always going to be a concern to me. We try to clean and reuse that if we can from year to year. I would say that's a mixed result of whether that really works. And so we don't do it all the time, especially if we don't have staffing to help us get through that.
I think if you go by the airport business center where the snow melt is, and in the spring when it starts to melt, look at the amount of gravel that's there. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, if it's helpful from my perspective, I'm interested. I mean, I'm respectful of environmental impact, of course, but clean and safe streets and reliably plowed streets are a bigger priority to me.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
So council, this is going to be the first capital-heavy plan that you see tonight. And so this will be similar to the supplementals. If there's capital projects that we present tonight that should get pulled for more in-depth conversation after you've had your questions discussed here, we'd like to know that. That really is important for us in balancing the asset management plan fund here earlier in the budget cycle as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. Tonight, I'm here with Haley Rodell, our engineering manager, and then I'm also here with PJ Murray, project manager within the engineering department. PJ's here to help out with the stormwater section of our presentation. That's all we have here. I'd like to take a moment to give an overview of the engineering department. One of our core responsibilities is protecting the Roaring Fork River from pollution and construction impacts. This includes the Clean River program that protects our river from pollutants and manages stormwater to prevent flooding. The department also manages our right-of-way, as well as improving pedestrian and biking infrastructure, ensuring the traveling public is safe. Through our construction mitigation program, we minimize the impacts of construction on this community. Our department also reviews building permits, ensuring properties in Aspen use our water efficiently and sustainably, and then we also review grading and drainage to ensure flooding risks are mitigated and to ensure every property upholds the city's water quality standards. Lastly, our GIS program supports internal departments and the community with several GIS tools and data. I'd like to start with our last year's wins in our Compass Plan. It includes improvements to our permitting process. We've reduced review times by an average of 25%, leading to faster project approvals. Communication with the development community has also been improved through website enhancements and through our update of our construction mitigation manual, which now includes a Spanish version to better serve our construction community. The next win we had this year is our Garment Street Storm Pipe project. This storm pipe is a key artery of our system. However, it was old and corroded. But with the upgrades to this critical pipe system, not only have we addressed these immediate concerns, but we've replaced aging water mains in the area. These were made of outdated cast iron and were more susceptible to failure. Lastly, in alignment with the city's strategic focus on fostering a safe and lived-in community, our department has spearheaded significant infrastructure maintenance projects. This was done by addressing areas of deteriorated concrete and improving our drainage systems. Along with concrete projects, we prioritize mobility and accessibility by improving ADA access in areas along Aspen Street and Hopkins Avenue. This picture in particular shows how we improve that drainage pan over by the Wells Fargo building. You remember when you tried to navigate that with a low-profile vehicle, you would definitely hit the pavement every time. So now it's a nice, smooth drive. Another area of infrastructure maintenance included our asphalt overlay project, which this year included Main Street, Mill Street, Hopkins, and Aspen Street. Our first Compass goal focuses on the customer. This is a dual-fold initiative that includes our commitment to smart customer-focused government and fiscal health. One of the projects included in this goal is our permitting process. We've listened to feedback and analyzed practices both within our community and outside of our community, and as a result, we are streamlining our permitting processes. This is a collaborative effort across multiple departments to create an efficient, transparent, and user-friendly system while ensuring the highest standards of quality and compliance. Secondly, we recognize the pivotal role of communication, especially when it pertains to capital projects. We plan on enhancing communication through cutting-edge mapping tools. These tools will not just provide visual insights on projects, but will empower our stakeholders with real-time data, progress updates, and collaborative opportunities. The projects under our next goal provide for a holistic approach to enhance Aspen as a safe, multimodal city. Whether someone's walking, driving an electric vehicle, or cycling, we are ensuring that they have the best facilities available. For example, the Garmisch Street Pedestrian Connection Project fills a gap in our city's pedestrian system, but also significantly aligns with the broader vision of creating a safe, lived-in community. The Garmisch Corridor, as many of you know, has been a focal point for our pedestrian improvements. We've made commendable progress on this corridor. However, there remains a missing link by Coke Park. This project will enhance pedestrian safety and connectivity and will also improve the connection to our newest park, the Dillensick Gardens. With this project, we have the opportunity to integrate an EV charging station. Furthermore, to boost our commitment to multimodal transportation, this project also paves the way for necessary infrastructure for a WeCycle station. Other projects in this goal include safer pedestrian corridors by widening sidewalks, along with improving intersections by making them safer for our most vulnerable users. These improvements will facilitate visibility and predictability for all users, creating an environment in which complex vehicle movements are safe, easy, and intuitive. In line with our strategic emphasis on smart customer-focused government, I'm excited to present our next initiative. Drones, as we all know, have swiftly transformed from being a novelty item to an indispensable tool for real-time, high-resolution aerial imagery. The capabilities of drone technology can offer unparalleled insights, especially when timely and accurate data collection is imperative. Recognizing this potential, we are creating a program to allow internal departments to request a drone mission. This program will streamline the process, making it more efficient, transparent, and user-friendly. As we continue to be a smart-focused government, innovation is a key aspect of our efforts. This includes a comprehensive 3D model of our city and will give us the ability to integrate layers of data, infrastructure details, and project implications all in one dynamic platform. Before you go to the next slide, I would like to submit this photo in Council's photo contest for this year's budget for your consideration.
The last engineering compass goal is related to the Clean River Program, which is also known as the Stormwater Program. Protect Our Waterways works towards the three strategic focus areas of maintaining a safe lived-in community, community engagement, and protecting our environment. The first project under this compass goal is the Garmisch Storm Pipe Replacement Project, and this is a continuation of the 2023 project. The second is the Stormwater System Assessment, and this is to continue to understand the city's underground piping system that discharges directly to our rivers. Having been installed decades ago, the pipe infrastructure is aging and deteriorating. We clean and video portions of the system every year to better understand the condition of these pipes, and it helps us to create a prioritized list for replacement. The third project is to increase water quality monitoring. This monitoring helps us understand and determine the effects of climate change on the river and helps us prepare moving forward. We also take samples at the city's 12 outfalls where the pipes meet the river during runoff events, so we can monitor the effects of the city on the river, as well as the effectiveness of our treatment methods and large projects. The goal here is to reduce sediment loads by 90%. There are large regional treatment projects at 4 of the largest outfalls. An example of that is the John Denver Sanctuary. The remainder of the 12 outfalls are untreated, and water quality monitoring helps us to prioritize where we should build pollutant removal next. The last project is the Clean River Program Success Education, and this will provide education and outreach opportunities for the community to inform them of the goals and successes of this program. The health of the river has been one of our community's top priorities for government services according to the last 10 years of the community survey. We'd like to share our commitment to this concern and celebrate the progress on protecting the river health with the community.
This is showing our structure of the engineering department. The bulk of our expenses are in staffing. The staffing is spread across several program areas as shown on this slide. Our revenues are derived from permitting fees and also through the rental of the right-of-way. This allows construction projects to be completed in a manner that protects the traveling public while minimizing the impact on the public right-of-way. Our expenditures, as mentioned previously, are primarily derived from staffing, and here we show a year-over-year increase of just under 4%.
So the first, let's stop before we go to capital. I just want to see if there's any questions on that before we jump into the capital plan.
Not questions, but a couple thoughts I want to share. One, the communications efforts that you and William did on the Main Street paving was the best I've ever seen by the city, so kudos. Great job, I appreciate it. Two, I'm glad you're looking at the pedestrian stuff on Garmisch by Coke Park. I also would ask, and I don't know if I have support for this, but that intersection from a vehicular standpoint and pedestrian conflict standpoint always has scared me with Durant. I think there should be a stop sign there coming both ways. I don't like the fact that you can turn right and left without a stop sign, so I would love for that to be looked at and considered. And lastly, as I'm looking at this goals thing, you got a council here that's supportive of updating our aging infrastructure, so please take advantage of that and make sure that we can get as much done to ensure that our infrastructure is in as good of condition as it can be for the future. Thanks for all.
Before we leave the stormwater treatment, I just want to give you a chapeau for, there was a runoff with a street project at, I think, Spring and Cooper this summer. And in the water treatment area going through John Denver Sanctuary, it captured all of the bad stuff, and none of it got to the Roaring Fork River. I don't think that probably passed under the radar, but I noticed it, and I'm really appreciative of the system that was in place and how quickly engineering was able to get down to the John Denver Sanctuary area and take care of that. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And I'll let the team know that.
Anything else, or should we jump into capital projects?
Sounds good.
All right, so our first capital project for 2024 is the red brick storm improvements on Hallam Street. This project will enhance safety in the red brick area, which is a hub for community arts and recreation. Currently in the winter, snow and ice builds up in the gutter. It does not drain. It overtops the sidewalk. It refreezes, which creates a treacherous, icy sidewalk. To make it worse, there's no definition between the parking lane and the sidewalk. Vehicles tend to park on the sidewalk, rendering it completely useless for pedestrians. The solution is to increase pedestrian safety in this area, includes the installation of a storm lateral with multiple inlets, as well as installing an improved curb line and properly sloped gutters. This will effectively redirect water and reduce icy conditions. With proper drainage and a clear vertical separation between the pedestrian walkway and the roadway, pedestrians will experience greater safety from vehicular traffic. Tree protection is a paramount part of this project, as there are significant trees adjacent to the project area. With the proposed improvements, we're not just ensuring safety, we're fostering a welcoming space for our visitors to the red brick. Our next project.
Okay, can I ask, I know you have a lot, so I want to go one by one so I don't forget things, sorry. PJ, totally get the need for this. Hallam Street residents have had a hell of a year. It's been really, really imposing on them. So I'm wondering if we should push this out a year.
From what? Hell of a year from private construction on residentials?
No.
From
right away. What is it, a storm
So we
pipe
just did a
right
storm
now?
lateral between Garmisch and First Street. This would be between Garmisch and Aspen Street.
And then there's also been the stair project at the Yellow Brick, which, I mean, just this whole 2-3 block radius of the West End has had a lot going on with it this year, so. something for consideration.
Yeah, we'll definitely defer to council on this. We felt from the safety, number of children in the area, that folks were fine being inconvenienced in exchange for that safety component.
Yeah, I get this one, and I've experienced it a lot myself. But I also know the impact on this section of the West End has been big this year. So.
Other council members, do you want to get more information on the schedule for what construction this street has had in this past summer to consider about delaying this project? John?
Isn't this currently where the sidewalk and everything's torn up right now?
Yes, we're dealing with a sewer lateral issue into the red brick building.
So when it gets put back together, we can do it right. Unless I'm misreading this.
The area that's torn up is at the corner of Garmisch and Hallam. This project extends all the way to Aspen Street. So it's not only, so yes, we're currently going to fix that corner because that's been a horrible corner for pedestrians as far as icing and things like that. This project continues on all the way to Aspen Street because that whole sidewalk needs, there's nuisance drainage, so there's going to be an extension of the storm system in this area to handle that nuisance drainage, and then also the sidewalk itself needs to be regraded and raised. So it's more than the corner, and we're fixing the corner now.
I actually know of a couple other locations. I actually know of a couple other locations in town that suffer from the same issue where ice builds up and people end up parking on the sidewalk and becomes an ice skating rink. So I'll get together with you afterwards about
Yes.
those other places.
I appreciate that.
I don't have a desire to interfere with your schedule.
All right.
Sam?
Yeah, without a proper alternative, this seems worthy of doing as soon as possible.
I'd be interested to see a schedule, just if you can update me. I don't have the firsthand experience of the neighbors. I don't know what they've gone through, but I support you moving forward with this in the schedule. But I'm interested to know what have the impacts been over there.
Okay. So can we bring that back when we bring the construction contract forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next project. Sections on the north and south sides of Hyman between Aspen and Garmisch Street have long been troubled by recurring issues of flooding and icing. Such conditions are not only an inconvenience to the daily commutes of our residents, but they also pose safety hazards. The project includes installation of 2 new storm inlets and repairs section of failing concrete. The inlets will effectively manage water runoff, dramatically reduce instances of flooding and icing during colder months, which will ensure safe and efficient transit regardless of the weather. Repairing the failing concrete will reduce trip hazards and will better protect the asphalt roadway from deterioration.
Shelley Liesel.
Yes.
Any questions on this project? Move on.
He needs it.
This next project is aimed at enhancing the city's most traveled intersection, which is Mill and Main. Over the years, the asphalt intersection has seen its share of wear and tear. We did go ahead and do some patching this year, but that's not gonna provide for long-term durability at this intersection. This project will replace the failing asphalt, right now it's not failing, but it will. And it replaces this asphalt mat with a concrete intersection. This project also gives us the opportunity to replace and upgrade the utilities situated beneath this intersection. And it will be a jointly funded project between CDOT and the city, Although we have not finalized that amount with CDOT at this time, so I'm not sure of the amount that they'll fund on this project. They have expressed interest and they do want to jointly partner on this project. I don't have the exact amount. This is an estimate, the $675K for their contribution.
Trish, I know it's early, but an idea of how long this project would take?
So we're going to go into design next year on the project and construction in 2026.
We don't know until we have design done. One of the things we'll evaluate, with this being concrete, it's going to take longer. It's going to be a major inconvenience. What's going to be more of an inconvenience, though, is when it's all potholed again, for safety reasons in particular. So in discussions with CDOT, this is eventually, I think, how we're going to end up with a proper rebuild of Main Street is intersection by intersection first, and then block by block. I don't think we're going to see a full redo of Main Street by CDOT unless it's connected to a new bridge.
But is this like a month that intersection is closed? Is this 6 months?
At the Hickory House corner, when we did that corner, and that was a complete shutdown of, traffic was completely detoured around. So we had complete, control of that intersection without any traffic control because we were able to do it. And that took 6 weeks. So this one, we won't be able to completely shut down that intersection. So, and the number of utilities are going to be a little bit more complex at this intersection than it was at the Hickory House corner. So gives you a gauge.
You guys comfortable advancing this one now? I mean, it's not construction anytime soon, but starting design.
Sooner the better.
I don't see any way around it.
Yeah. Do you have an alternative?
Certainly not, no.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a patchwork approach, which Sarah just alluded to.
It's patchwork, but it's concrete at least, which is a big deal, so.
I meant patchwork, like intersection by intersection, block by block.
Yeah.
It's not like we're going to fix Main Street once and for all, which I understand is very expensive and won't get green-lighted till we figure out a entrance solution, so.
I think the difficulty of keeping all of Main Street closed to traffic would be very difficult.
It's really hard to do at this intersection, and we may not even recommend it because of the way it forces to the pedestrian safety issues, as we'd have to move traffic, east-west traffic flow further south, and then wrap them back around through Rio Grande Place potentially. So that's why when we get further in design and the construction mitigation plan is developed, it'll look at that traffic management component for project phasing.
Thanks.
So this next project includes a bus stop pull-out improvements at Snow Bunny and Cemetery. Adjacent to the improved bus stops, a recycle pad will be included for expansion of bike service. The project also includes pedestrian safety improvements and will improve vehicle sight lines to increase the safety of pedestrians crossing Cemetery Lane. This project will be designed in-house by city engineering staff and is a commitment to creating an integrated, connected, and safe urban landscape.
Are there any plans to put another speed bump in by chance?
I think those types of details would be worked out during the design.
Okay, I heard during the reduced speed limit conversation, I heard from quite a few people on Cemetery Lane that they'd like to see more traffic calming measures.
Support of that.
Thanks.
There's currently a bus stop there, right, with a pull-off?
Correct.
Could you maybe give me a little more color on what the upgrade might look like?
It would probably be a concrete pull-out where they can get completely out of the travel lane, benches, possibly trash receptacles, whatever may be needed for pedestrians at the bus stop.
This intersection needs a much more visual cueing for drivers about where they're supposed to have their vehicles with the width of this pavement in this area. The second thing is we hear a lot from neighbors in that area with the nature of how that crosswalk is and where the curve is, a feeling of concern with the speeds, with the vehicles that are headed south on Cemetery Lane. So those are all issues that the study work will take under consideration about how do you firm that up, how does it work with snow removal operations, things like that.
Thanks.
Hunter Creek, Centennial, and Smuggler Park are some of our most densely populated areas. However, they lack a safe, dedicated pathway along Gibson Avenue. This project will connect key areas of our community, ensuring that residents can safely and comfortably navigate their way from the city's core. Our PED Bike Master Plan, which is a roadmap for Aspen's mobility future, has also identified this connection as critical. In summary, the Gibson Pedestrian Connection Project will enhance safety and improve the connectivity by completing this missing link in our network. So this is that part of the sidewalk where we have that, it's by Smuggler Park, you know, that house that is like, yes, there's a speed bump and there's a house that's like literally almost a foot or so off the road there. That's this pinch point. This pinch point, the sidewalk would be on the other side of the road from where that house is. Actually, in this photo where that red car is, that's where that house is.
Trish, normally these sidewalk get installed when a property is developed adjacent to it, but the city is looking at doing this. Are we looking at recapturing the cost if that property is redeveloped?
So we'll complete missing links that are identified as critical or is higher in the city's priority that don't look like there's a redevelopment coming in the near future. So we can continue to wait on this section until that property redevelops. As far as recapturing the costs, that we won't be able to do that. It's not retroactive on how we do these links. So we can, when a property develops, we get agreements for when they're not, let's say it's not ready for a link to be completed, we'll get those agreements to say, okay, when we are ready to complete this link, we'll get reimbursed from you on this, but in this case, we don't have that agreement in place, so we won't be able to recover those costs.
When will you know if land acquisition is required?
We need to get into the design and the survey.
So from a timing perspective, that is probably in about 12 months away. We need to get through design and design alternatives, and then if there is a land acquisition component, we would start those negotiations. And ultimately, it would come to council when we're seeking approval of that real estate transaction or the easement, depending upon the situation.
I'm sorry, this is the right-of-way or city right-of-way on that road?
I'm not sure that there's enough right-of-way to fit this segment or not. I don't know. There could be, though. I don't have that answer. It's pretty close.
All right, well, this will tie into another one that's coming up in a second, so I'll save some comments or questions for you to the next one.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Recognizing the integral role of infrastructure in facilitating access to essential services, the Concrete and ADA Pedestrian Improvement Project removes and replaces areas of deteriorated concrete and improves our drainage system to ensure flooding risks, creating a safer, more resilient travelway. Additionally, the project enhances mobility and accessibility by improving ADA access throughout the city. Next year's focus areas include Rio Grande, Hyman, Original. I can go through the detail of the areas, but in general, it's replacing.
Yeah, and so for some clarity, on the last slide as well as this one, you have a running list that's a prioritization of where we need curb and gutter and ADA improvements, as well as missing sidewalk links, right?
Yes.
So the reason that you're bringing these to us is because they've risen to the top of your priority lists. We're just trying to check stuff off. So for example, that last one, Gibson, it's kind of thorny, but that's the one that we're seeing from your department lens that is prioritized for getting work done on it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And it is not just the engineering department, it's the ped bike safety team that looks at all kinds of places. So you have about 7 departments weighing in about where those services are needed. And they look back at the adopted policies of council around sidewalks, for example, and curb and gutter placement as a criteria they consider in their prioritization process.
Trish, is there a sidewalk master plan, I think that Tori's talking about, that shows out years?
So there is, so the ped bike master plan identifies all those missing links. And there are, I think there's close to 80 different links across the city. And so we have prioritized those links. That's what's in this plan. Coke Park is one of those links that are missing. The Gibson, you know.
Have you prioritized those and put target years for those?
Not all of them, because some of them will be covered by development too, but they're not prioritized at this point.
Could you forward that as an information only, please?
Sure.
Yep.
I think the plan's already on the city's website, right? Yeah, so we'll just email out the link for the follow-up where you can see the whole plan that has that information.
Thanks.
Rather than writing a follow-up memo.
Okay.
All right.
The pavement preservation program includes a 3-year cycle of resurfacing our streets and an annual pavement condition assessment. Instead of approaching pavement maintenance reactively, this assessment will equip us with the power of foresight. It will meticulously evaluate the current state of our asphalt and identify potential problem areas and assess the deterioration risks. So this program is, as far as the pavement preservation part of this, the assessment, is a health check of our city's roads. So that's what we'll be doing next year, is that assessment. And then the next year is scheduled for our regular, it's part of our 3-year resurfacing cycle. So that will be the next year after that.
Again, ready for the roller derby again.
Yeah.
Does that happen there?
We should make it happen.
Bring back the art carts.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Is there any questions
Need a log.
on our asphalt resurfacing?
And so just for clarity, this is only on municipally owned streets. This does not include allocations that might be necessary for Main Street after we get through another winter.
These are some other capital projects of note. The 4th and Main intersection is a vital connection. It bridges key destinations, connecting the Hopkins Ped Bikeway to the music tent, and also serves as a primary crossing for the Jewish Community Center. The rapid flash beacons at this location, are intended to alert traffic of pedestrians, but they're really not visible enough. And this lack of visibility compromises the safety of those relying on this crossing point. This project aims to address this issue to ensure that this intersection is not only functional, but safe for every pedestrian. And then the next one is our GIS aerial photography. We do this every 4 years to make sure that we have the most updated information in our aerials, our aerial imagery. And next year is our next flyover schedule. And then the rest are our capital maintenance projects.
John?
So it's 129 grand a year to do aerial photography of our city?
Every 4 years.
Every 4 years, okay. That makes a difference.
Every 4 years. It's not only the flyover, but it's also the how they analyze that data. So we do LiDAR also, and we're able to so it actually identifies, trees and roads, and so it's not only a photograph. Underneath that photograph, it has all that data associated with it.
Cool, I'd like to see it.
Bill?
4th and Main. I understand the need for the pedestrian improvements there. I'm a proponent of pedestrian safety. I don't want to do anything on Main Street until we have a comprehensive plan for Main Street. And part of that plan should be, how do we upgrade the pedestrian improvements and safety at that crossing? I don't want to be spending money on something that might make our problems worse. I don't think this is something that needs to happen tomorrow. I get the issue. I respect the issue. I want to look at this holistically and smartly, and I don't think that spending 120 grand now on that does that.
What are the actual improvements for that project?
So the rapid flash on the north side is behind a large cottonwood, and the rapid flash on the other side gets hit almost every winter. It gets knocked out. So we need better protection, for the rapid flash on the south side and the north side. We need to figure out a better way to make it more visible. And I don't know if it's moving it in front of the tree or we need to do something, because you cannot see it, the one on the north side, at all.
It's always, never want to be nitpicky here, but it is funny, $120,000 to move a couple of lights is extraordinary to think about as that. Not to say that it's not needed, but
It's the electrical infrastructure associated with it too, that's what costs money.
Well, that's more to Bill's point of getting it right the first time. The only counter I have to that though is, regardless of what the entrance to Aspen is, I think this intersection is still going to be the same as far as the way it looks.
But maybe not the way it functions. So maybe rapid flash is the wrong solution there. Maybe it's some kind of timed pedestrian crossing, like I've been talking about at the 8th Street bus stop. I'm just not sure it's the right approach, and we're about to hire a consultant for a holistic look at the whole corridor. They should be looking at this too before we spend this money. That's my point.
Interesting.
I think it'd be a long time before we get a whole comprehensive plan, and in that interim, pedestrian safety, I think, will be enhanced at this intersection.
What's on this corner? I can't place 4th. This is the corner of
Jewish communities.
Chabad, and then Rolled and Broughton is like catty corner to that.
Nicest store.
Yeah, I think here too is that to add something that stops Main Street flow, I really doubt will be warrant for CDOT. I mean, I just want to be practical with you. We could always evaluate that, but I'm not sure it's going to really result in getting their permission to put any type of infrastructure in designed to halt the traffic flow versus the pedestrian count. Again, we can look into it. That's just my gut, based upon the little cross traffic we have at this intersection from vehicles. And the pedestrian traffic, while we have it here, it is actually not at a volume like, for example, as we'll find closer to Mill or that area. So we'll do whatever you want, whether you want us to do this next year, if you want us to wait.
I just given the imminence of this work that we're about to do, I mean, I think Pete told me recently that first quarter we should have somebody signed up on this effort. Why would we not contemplate this as part of that study?
This is for pedestrian flashers. Are they currently there?
Yes. They get knocked out and you can't see the other one.
I mean, I'm just thinking about this corner. You know, there is a bit of pedestrian travel across here. And Bill, you're saying that, are you saying that there would be a better solution?
Maybe. I don't know the answer, but I think that every bit of Main Street needs to be analyzed. What are the bottlenecks? What's causing traffic to slow down? It may not be here. The engineer may be like, this is a non-event. I don't know. But
A non-event of what? Of pedestrian?
creating a traffic bottleneck, a vehicular traffic bottleneck. Like, I totally understand and respect the fact that these need work, right? Both from a visual standpoint, whatever else. But I just don't want to do that work before we have an opportunity for somebody to weigh in on it.
Because the alternative would be to not have pedestrian flashers at this intersection?
Right, what if I mean, I don't think this intersection is the example of it, but maybe the engineer says, this is really a problem, you need a bridge or a tunnel here. I don't think this is gonna be the one, but maybe that's the case at 8th Street, right?
We'll get another consultant. All right. Bill wants to hold off on this. Other council members, you know, does anybody else want to? I don't need a whole bunch of discussion. Does anybody else want to hold off on this? Not hearing any.
Okay, let's move on.
In summary, the department's compass goals and capital projects touch on many of the city's strategic focus areas, along with the council goals of mobility, customer-focused government, protecting our environment, and prioritizing infrastructure maintenance. Are there any final questions?
I had a question about Park Avenue. Is that slated for 2024?
Yes.
It'll be a carry forward, because after we got through council's discussion this year, it was not a good time for bidding, and to ensure completion by the end of the year. So we anticipate requesting that as a carry forward.
Okay. And final design work has not happened on that?
Yes,
You
it
are
has.
at that?
We're
'Cause, I mean,
finalizing
what
it.
we saw, you know, I have concerns. We have some residents that live over there that have some concerns. I know that you guys have met with them, and I know that you've addressed them. You know, I'm still, that top part of where the corner is, where the rock is, where the slope starts, I'm still concerned about it. I hope that the design that we're doing is something that is as sensitive as possible. I reread the memo that we got with it last time, again today, and we talked about a lighter touch. And the response was that it is the lighter touch. I'm still concerned about it. I'm concerned about the drainage that's gonna happen over there, but I'm also concerned about us building something to specs that doesn't really fit there and doesn't need to be there. So the question I have for you is that when you look at a project like that, you have certain parameters and requirements from the design that you bring into it. And we don't seem to waver from that. We try not to as much as possible. But if we need to, can we? I know that we try to build to the specs, but when we're working in interesting places, for example, that Gibson Avenue sidewalk that you're talking about, that we don't have the right of way for, you know, Aspen's an old mountain town. Our roadways and our grid aren't laid out perfectly because of our topography, et cetera. So when we come back to that project, I'm gonna have the same questions about, to make sure that the drainage is not gonna be a problem for people. But I'm also gonna be asking if there is a way for us not to, widen it as much as I think has been proposed. Anyway, I want to bring that up at this time. I have concerns about that project, so.
So the timing for that, because it's not in what we have, we don't have that agenda-sized for tonight for discussion. So I would encourage the council, if they want to have want to direct staff to change the design, that we get that direction on a regular meeting with some specificity. Because I've been through probably 6, 7 work sessions now on this one project.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, there's just been a lack of disagreement, so it's been majority positioned amongst who's sitting in these chairs that has driven the design we're at today.
Yeah, and you know what I'd love to start with is just a meeting, just me. I don't need to find out yet. I just need to find out if what I'm thinking about is even feasible. So if anybody would join me for a site visit, that'd be awesome. And then we can talk about whether we want to bring it back to a full council or not.
Was there last night?
Yeah, I'm there almost every day, but nonetheless, that'd be helpful for me, just to talk through it with you guys. So I don't need to ask for a work session at this time. I don't know if other people share my concerns, but I'd like to look at it myself with you.
We'll have the project team, which includes Pete and Carly, reach out and.
I'd love to just go out there with you.
I'll join you on that. I think that particularly hidden driveway sign, and we've brought this up a number of times, and I just have to have faith that the engineering department knows how to do this, that they have a lot of experience doing it, and I'll take a walk with you.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Trish.
And I'll join that meeting too.
Any other questions? Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Now we'll transition into the Stormwater Fund. The Stormwater Program, also known as the Clean River Program, is responsible for protecting and improving the health of the Roaring Fork River by reducing the impacts of urbanization. We protect and improve our environment through public education and involvement, stormwater management, stormwater quality projects, river management, and riparian area improvements. These goals are achieved by the Stormwater Fund, which supports the Stormwater Program and the Clean River Program. It funds 4.5 FTEs across 4 departments: streets, engineering, stormwater, and parks. There are 2 dedicated FTEs exclusively for stormwater activities. Capital projects are the largest expense, and that's followed by personnel. The Clean River Program revenue is generated primarily from a dedicated property tax of 0.65 mils. This property tax only funds the Clean River Program and does not contribute to any other programs. Additionally, Stormwater receives contributions from building permit review fees and construction mitigation fees. For 2024, our operating budget is around $680,000. Storm drainage management and development services make up the majority of our operating expenses. These expenses cover labor of staff, the 4 FTEs I just mentioned, and they are working on managing projects, maintaining infrastructure, and development review.
Can we stay on this slide for 1 second, please? Sarah, you have mentioned to me in the past that the stormwater real estate tax is not Tabor limited, and that our funding needs are great for upcoming infrastructure projects related to stormwater. Is that accurate?
That's true.
Thank you. Why then does this say that at the end of 2024, our ending balance will be 1,000% of our target?
Right. So right now, we have, pick a number, roughly 18 million or so of different projects that we have identified, but we don't have the resources to fund them in those future years at this point. So we are scheduling them in as we can afford them. As you know, we had a conversation about how to use the help with the armory, and so that's kind of been more directed towards the armory remodel. as opposed to a program like this. We did get the ARPA funds that had some flexibility in it recently, and as you saw on the slide deck yesterday, we dedicated that full amount in 2023 to go towards these types of projects. So we're trying to schedule those projects in as we can. Some of those are larger, some of them are smaller. They're also doing, as I said, a scoping of all the pipe network and identifying the priorities and attacking those first.
Okay, so I guess the follow-up question is, why is your target low if you have such impending needs?
So that's just a function of our financial policies. The majority of those types of items are capital. Capital can go up and down in most funds that are capital heavy. If we were to throw a huge capital project in here, you'd see that targeted reserve go way up for that 1 year, and then it would fall back off. So we do try to plan for those as we see them on the horizon. That gives us an opportunity to build a fund balance up, for instance, to hit that. But in this particular case, we just don't have the revenue resources coming into this fund at this time.
Thanks.
So the major capital project in the Stormwater Fund this year is similar to that of 2023, and it's to replace deteriorated infrastructure in Garmisch Street. Garmisch is highlighted in this image with the different colors representing different sections of pipe. The yellow color is the pipe that is under Main Street, and that was replaced in 2022 as part of the Papke Transit Hub. The section in blue is an engineering compass win this year, and that's the section of pipe that was replaced near the red brick and yellow brick. That was a partnership with the water department and IT with their infrastructure upgrades. The remaining sections of Garmisch that require maintenance or replacement are shown in the red lines, and those are planned for 2024. The north section is from Maine to Hallam, and that will be replaced. And then the section near Coke Park to the south will potentially be lined. We have worked diligently with other departments to schedule and combine work in these areas as an effort to reduce disturbances to the neighborhood and gain economies of scale.
Are there any questions on this?
April joined us. In summary, the Clean River Program is focused on protecting our waterways and the environment in 2024 through prioritizing stormwater infrastructure upgrades. These upgrades will continue to improve the safety of our neighborhoods and the health of our river, which is, again, one of the community's highest priorities.
Do other communities talk about stormwater as much as we do?
I could tell you in the Midwest, we talked about it all the time about how your water is going to stay off my property. So quite different story here. The one thing I'd just say about this fund is, as we've talked about, the unmet needs are great, and the fund balance is not sufficient to execute that work. The council always has the option to look at new revenue sources or repurposing revenue sources to support this fund. If you're doing repurposing, that primarily only comes from your asset management plan and your general fund. So it will compete against your other capital priorities there if you would like to make a transfer in for that work to be expedited more quickly. At one point, there was a impact fee for this fund, and that was discontinued. And so that is another alternative if the council were desirous of revisiting that.
I almost feel like we would need some input from you on both of those.
Oh, that's a whole work session.
On both
No,
those
I'm just letting
items.
you know.
If there were capital projects that you would recommend, I mean, I don't think that we could probably start picking off ones and make that prioritization.
We have a priority list of projects based on the deterioration of the infrastructure. What I need is revenue source to pay for it. So really the council conversation is less about the projects and more about the revenue in my view. And then how does that revenue need compete with your other revenue needs?
Yeah, I mean, I sat here through the up and down of the development impact fee for stormwater, putting it in, reducing it, getting rid of it, all that kind of thing. So I don't see a whole bunch of enthusiasm for tackling that at this time. But perhaps that is a good work session for next year.
I'll add it to the possibilities list.
All right.
Yeah, and to dovetail on that or to follow that, if we have a work session on it, if there are other capital projects that would be shelved for or delayed, what are they? And so we've got X amount of funds, and how do we allocate those funds to those projects?
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
April?
Yes,
Hi.
April, we did ask.
Had any other questions?
We appreciate you coming back. That's very nice of you.
Thanks, I appreciate you all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
April.
all.
Nice to see you all. Thanks for continuing to support the stormwater program, which we don't talk about enough.
You're all about.
Yes.
Thanks, Trish.
I don't know whose water that is. All right, thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting us discuss our funds tonight. I'm Pete Rice. This is Lynn Runbaugh, and we are with the Parking and Transportation Departments. We are the people that are tasked with getting people around the city of Aspen. We play a key role in being environmentally conscious and a livable community through management of parking and providing those eco-friendly transit alternatives to the community. Our projects mainly focus on aging infrastructure and around Highway 82, including the Castle Creek Bridge and several of the pieces that you've mentioned tonight previously. Compass wins. We had a great year. It started off last year with a pretty heavy task in raising awareness on the Castle Creek Bridge, the record of decision, and preferred alternative. This looked like an educational and discussion with the public. We met with over 1,300 individuals. We had 47 meetings and 70 nights. We met with several HOAs, the West End residents individually, and Harbor Lane residents, and including SKICO and everything. While the project is incredibly difficult, and as we all know, the one thing that came out of this is we really had a connection with the community. They felt like they got to know several of us, and I think people did understand the project and some of the challenges that we have in transportation and movement in the future. Our second compass looks at technologies. Since 2020, the workforce has changed and the way that we manage is different. And so really we wanted to take a step forward and start looking at technologies that may help us improve parking management. This particular test was a living lab this year, and it's currently in on Hopkins. And it's essentially using sensors that you probably didn't even notice as you walk down the street. Currently, we're testing this just to see if the products can last our winters and continue to provide us the data that we're looking for. This is just a step as we have further conversations in our parking and transportation studies to make sure that this technology, as you start to look into the different alternatives, that this is something that will actually work for the city of Aspen. Our last success really was tied in with the downtown core. What this looked at was changing the way that we do citations for the 4-hour overtime. We had not changed any parking citations in a long time, and really in the core, the biggest problem was turnover. There's several companies that would take up a block with their employees or construction, and they would take the entire day, and there was no turnovers in certain sections. So we had to come up with an alternative and go through a policy change. I'm glad to report, so what it looked like, it used to be $30. What we did was we tiered it. It went 50, 100, second offense, all the way up to $250. And then on the fourth offense, it was a court appointment. You had to make a court appearance. And this really did take away a lot of the pieces of where people would come in and just pay massive tickets. We did not get one court appearance, and so people listened, the message got out, and the turnover did increase. This is going to be a continual challenge that we have to look at in order to manage the downtown core, but this was a big piece, especially with several companies.
On that topic, do you know how many outstanding, what's our percentage of payment for tickets? Do we know?
Yeah, I can get a pretty detailed account of all that with you. It's pretty low comparably to the rest of the cities. Where we're struggling a little bit more right now as a city, and what we're really taking a look at, is in compliance of actually payment. The citations, so are people paying at the parking meters?
No.
That's low, but what you're talking about are
people
people paying
paying
parking
the
tickets. That's
citations?
in line with like the rest of the communities. And so we'll focus on that as we do this study to improve that a little bit. There's a lot of pieces that are complicated with that, and how scofflaw works, as you well know. You've had this discussion with Mitch in the past. But it's something that we're focused on this year, along with increasing the compliance. They kind of go hand in hand together a little bit.
You know, because a couple times I've talked about the idea of maybe the ability, if you got a parking ticket and you paid it that day, that you could get a reduction on it or something like that. Anyway, we don't need to talk about it now. I don't have any concrete ideas. I'm just trying to think of ways that we can incentivize people to take care of it. I also, I do have to say, I mean, I feel for locals that get hit with a ticket for $50. It's a lot.
I just want to clarify, though, our bigger problem is locals who don't pay to begin with.
I get it. I mean, I'm trying to look at the whole thing, you know, there's definitely kind of a winning system, I think, that can still evolve.
And I've heard from you, and I've seen it myself, and the reason that we really are tried to get this parking component as part of our holistic study is to make sure that we have these ideas that are presented to you with different alternatives. You know, it's a behavioral thing in Aspen historically, and what you're discussing right now, is there a local favoritism? We need that policy direction from council with parking specifically, because it's been a long time since we've looked at it in a holistic manner. So my whole plan is to kind of present you these ideas going forward, and how do you want us to run your policy? How do you want this with the community input? And parking is an interesting conversation with the community. You know, they're never gonna want to increase in citations, of course, but you've got to make a decision on like what is the best behavior change.
I appreciate that. You know, the last thing I'll say is I thought that this summer was very successful in the core. You know, I had some issues around allotted parking for construction projects and stuff like that, but even given that, I thought that it really worked well this year. My observations downtown were I saw available parking, I saw compliance from people that were there, and I didn't get nearly as many complaints as a normal summer. I thought this summer
I will tell myself, thank you. I will say that it's helpful that we have had, we were able to hire staff this spring a little bit. And the second piece is we did start to prioritize the core a little bit. We had opportunities, similar to the discussion you had with Main Street last week. You know, we're going to be taking some people off that, so it's all about how you operate it. And I did, because the last couple of years, in the discussions we've had, we did prioritize the core.
I think you did a really great job, and I think the guys that you have out on the street too are doing a really great job.
Thank you.
They're maintaining a positive attitude in the face of what is often very difficult to do that. Ward, did you have some comments?
Yeah, have we had a council discussion? I know we've mentioned in passing a couple of times about street parking passes by lodges and passes for business owners as it relates to availability of on-street parking and even the underground street parking not being fully utilized. Have we had that discussion? Where we've just
we had a work session last November that started to touch on those pieces specifically, and kind of the impacts. I mean, to go through that now is a 2 or 3 hour discussion on the human behavior, but that is part of this study, because those lodge passes right now, as we discussed last year, may not be in line with how you want the behavior. And so they essentially fill the residential, I'm giving you the 10-second. They fill the residential areas, which of course impacts the residents, and it doesn't necessarily help the core. And so, broad picture, you need to take a look at how these permits are impacting, and we're gonna try to provide you that data. We have really good data that we've taken with staff that's been very detailed for the last year on streets specifically, and so we're hoping to provide a clearer picture of what those impacts are and some of the decisions you need to make.
And does that data include lodge street permit usage?
It does include the lodge permits.
When
Now, the
we
lodge
gonna-
permits, we did not track them in the residential, but we know how many are out there typically.
And when are we going to see this back at council?
Spring.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
Pete, your cell phone light's on.
Well, I need to see. I am blind half the time.
That was the most profound thing I have to say tonight. I'm having a little bit of indigestion with the Castle Creek Bridge campaign being on your compass wins. And I'm not bringing this up to chastise you or criticize you or your team. I bring it up because it came across to me as an advocacy effort and not an educational effort and not an awareness effort. And I attended a lot of these events and read a lot about it, as you know, Pete. And the ultimate reason why I bring it up is because we're going to be having more of these educational efforts moving forward, and there's some big decisions that are going to have to be made moving forward. And if the direction that's given at this table is one of education, I would really like it to come across as education and not this is what we're doing, but this is one of the options being contemplated, or this is a decision that was made in the past that we'd like everyone to understand, whatever the circumstances may warrant. But I don't think the tone of that effort was right by me. Thanks.
Fair enough. And I specifically had conversations with you during that time, so I'll reflect on myself.
Yeah, and I'll comment to Bill's comment. I also have spoken to a lot of people that went to those, and I got the feeling from them that it was more of a push-pull or an advocacy for the record of decision. So I'd like to see those outreaches to be really neutral without that what apparently was a advocacy.
Sure, so we'll come back to you on that. I mean, I met with every sitting council member before that campaign started to go over the campaign and provide clarity on the approach options. So I don't want to confuse that there was disengagement from the council and some of that decision-making on that approach. And the approach was very clear, is to educate on the record of decision, not the other alternatives that were explored prior to making that record of decision. Thank you.
All right, our coming year, you've heard, we've just had discussions on one of them, but one of them is to really, until we make a decision on the infrastructure pieces, we want to improve our programmatic piece, and that really involves the mobility around town. There's two different ways. The one is the study, of course, that we've had several conversations with. How do we change the downtown, or what are the different uses, like with the workforce changes that we've had with bus drivers, those are pretty big discussions. And also on there, we have the zero emissions study that's being worked on with RAFTA. That's going to be really important to this department going forward, and I'll discuss a little bit more of that going forward. But the whole goal of this piece is to provide people the candy to get around town without having to rely on that single occupied vehicle. Second is the other part of that study, and this is what we just got through studying. This is the parking component, all of it. I think it's really important that I've had initial meetings with the business community and involve a lot of people in this robust public outreach piece. and make sure that we assure that there is a welcoming site to downtown core in the changes that we make. But this does involve fee ordinances, this does involve the permits, this involves the technologies that I anticipate are going to be utilized going into the future to help managing the downtown core. The Rio Grande parking garage improvements, we discussed this a couple weeks ago during consent, and so we've had our kickoff meetings. This really, the garage needs to be improved. This first piece of it is a guidance system that tells people when it's full, real-time data. It tells people where they can go and park. It's just a lot more efficient. This will provide you the occupancy, who's using it, all these different informational pieces that you've requested over the years of how's it being used, what's the turnover. All this information is going to be available to us to make future decisions. This also starts to build into a plan of making a better payment system. It's a little clunky right now, and so how you can pay with Google, Apple, a whole new payment system so that we don't have quite as many errors as we do at the entry and exit gates. John?
Yeah, while we're talking about improve the efficiency of the Rio Grande parking garage, I think that this has been brought up before, but have we talked to the major hotels in town, Jerome, St. Regis, Mountain Chalet, to know about the efficiencies in their garages and how we can manage our parking better?
That gets complicated. We have tried to do the research and try to reach out to a few of them. We can look at the planning documents and see what they're allowed publicly. Some of the information they share is private, but some of it you can get online. That effort really, we're going to try to use the consultant for a little piece, but it's really got to be led by staff and really going to reach out to the hotels. I've tried to do that through a few different venues, but it's a really complicated process to bring that all into how that impacts our downtown core.
Well, I know anecdotally that a large part of the Jerome's parking garage is not used for parking, it's used for storage. And I know that because of that, it seems obvious that a lot of those cars that would be parked in their garage are being parked in the core neighborhood.
And this system's going to allow us to kind of know that. We know some of the hotels that do use the garage already. And I can't speak, though, it's hard to go up to a certain private business and how are you using your garage? Is it full? You know, they may not be as forthcoming, but we can try.
Well, and the key for that is I doubt that information will be voluntarily disclosed because it could lead into a zoning compliance case.
Understood.
And that is typically why it is not voluntarily provided. And so there has to be a basis to force an inspection. And failure to provide information is not a basis
Understood.
in that particular scenario.
I thought I recalled when we did have the valet parking, that St. Regis indicated that they had some space that they would rent on a daily basis or short-term basis.
I can't remember if it was there or the Hyatt, Grand Hyatt, but
so.
yes, we did have that conversation. And really the outcome of it is it doesn't take the government to be involved in them doing that work. That's a private business decision for them to do.
Revenue stream.
For them.
The transportation department involves 6 FTEs, and they really, they manage a lot of programs with a small staff. The staff really is heavy, obviously, with all the programs you see right there, and they're bouncing around town. But it's also important to remember that they are involved in the regional planning for transportation. They're heavily involved with the RAFTA planning. And this group is responsible for being involved with the EOTC and the regional planning around that group. And so you can see the services provided by this group are pretty heavy. Transportation revenues. And so what's really important to know, we have a healthy balance for 2024. The reason that this balance is heavy right now is because during the COVID time period, we received the CARES Act money in that funding, which were large one-time payments. And so this budget was really boosted during that time. And the reason that this budget needs to be healthy is because as we get into our expenditures in the next slide, it's really important to notice that where we have our 6.5 here, go ahead and flip in the expenditures, we can spend our money. And the reason that is for a lot of reasons that I'd like to get into, because this is a little bit of a complicated budget. Essentially, as I've described in the past, the operation costs between RAFTA, and that includes all the maintenance and all the vehicles, is usually estimated around 4%. Generally, what we're seeing is between 7 and 11%. And so these operating costs are going up pretty astronomically every single year. And additionally, what's not included in this is there is 8 purchases of buses that are on schedule. Buses usually run between 1 to 1.5 million. We're really going to dive into that this year with RAFTA through their study. And another piece of that is, you have to have a systematic replacement of buses, mainly due because grants, they want to make sure the useful life of buses is done before you can move on and buy a new bus. So that's why they're kind of scheduled out in the way they are. The other pieces of the transportation budget that are pretty heavy are, if you have the options for the lumberyard, you may want to increase the service to the lumberyard. This fund needs to be able to healthy enough to be able to allow you to make those choices. Secondly, a lot of the capital projects that you're discussing right now, including the bridge and some of the S-curves in Main Street, a good portion of that is going to come out of these funds. And so we have a healthy budget, that's a good thing, but as you can see, the expenditures that we're planning on, I'm tracking very carefully because the operating costs are really climbing more than what we're anticipating. Are there any questions on the funds before we jump? I tried to make that short.
I had a question that jumped out at me on the investment income was $671K. What's sitting there?
Do you want to, it's investment income is basically because we have a healthy fund right now, but Pete can get into that.
So with the market changes over the last year, we've been getting a lot better return on our investments and locking those in for the next number of years. So that's been very advantageous versus the last 5 years, last decade, we've been seeing next to nothing on return. And we had some investments that were invested prior to that were still holding us up a little bit. But every new investment we used to be making was making, 0.5%. Now we're making about 5.5% on our new investments. So with this fund, as it has a large fund balance, it's participating in our pooled investment pool, and it's basically getting the benefit of that.
I hate to see money just sitting there not being used.
Yeah, so I think that's what Pete was basically alluding to, is that we're kind of banking this for those needs in the future.
Yep.
What would, what is the lowest this fund balance?
Going back, it sounds like it was in the red not too long ago.
It was actually upside down before I got here?
I don't know if it was upside down, but it was really
Upside
struggling about a decade, a little bit more than a decade ago.
2019, it was about $2.5 million.
Yeah.
So,
We
and
did a lot of federal funds during the pandemic. That really gave us a boost, and we saw our sales tax and some of our other resources really kick in, and they grew exponentially for a few years.
That's great.
And I've challenged the staff to say, how should this fund balance be used? If it's, how much should we be keeping and waiting while the council makes a decision about Highway 82? And is there some of these dollars we should just go ahead and deploy for community benefit sooner? They're working on that. We chose not to bring it forward in this budget process because there's a lot of coordination with RAFTA with some of those decisions too. And that's a new ask onto their work plate to collaborate on that.
Supplemental request. This one is essentially, we did a living lab this last year where we tested out using a vendor for services for like emergencies, quick responses, midnight events, a lot of the things that our staff was having trouble handling on a real-time basis, and a lot of things that were needed, whether the bathroom was damaged or close-offs. There's all kinds of different needs. And so this fund's really used to help maintain the Ruby Park in quick instances, and was really successful this last year. This is the shuttle replacement. This is one of our big purchases, but keep in mind we are going to go through the process with RAFTA on their zero emission study prior to making any decisions with council on the vehicle to purchase through this. We just want to be assured that shuttles are a little more complicated than buses, which sounds funny, but currently we want to make sure that we're aligned with RAFTA in the purchase of what an electric shuttle looks like in the future.
Yeah, I thought we contracted with RAFTA for the circulators, and do they not cover the capital, the shuttles? We pay for the shuttles and they operate them?
We pay for the shuttles and the buses and the bus stops in town as part of our municipal service compared to the RAFTA service. They're just our contracted vendor for drivers and operations.
Okay.
Sorry, when I took your.
No, that was perfect.
All right. This is something that Bill alluded to earlier in the Highway 82 efficiency planning. This is money set aside based on your comments on several occasions, mainly the work session in Maine, that really discussed the entrance to Aspen. This fund, per your comments, are really infrastructure pieces, signals, anything that you think can improve congestion for single occupied vehicles outbound was really the direction at the time. Now, prior to doing that and to implementing this, staff is working with the current consultant that is working on the existing Castle Creek Bridge assessment. They are working on several pieces, including the S-curves as their efficiency, and kind of gathering up all the existing documents that we have. I wanted to do that before starting any project like this to make sure that we had all the information prior to make decisions. The second piece that has to fall in place is what Jen Uten and I presented to you as far as your transportation goal, and that's a traffic study. In Q1, January, we want to have a work session that really looks at the traffic aspect of this and what kind of traffic study you want. Is it origin and destination? Or there's several options that we can go through and give you the alternatives and the plus minus before starting that endeavor. After that endeavor, if there is a direction that council wants to go, this is the money that would be placed for that money during the summer and fall to begin that process. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks. I'm not sure I understand the traffic study, and maybe we'll talk about that separately. That's not of tremendous interest to me. This is what's of real interest to me. And for me, it's not just about outbound congestion, it's inbound as well. What I remember hearing at this table was we want a comprehensive traffic flow improvement study from the intercept lot to the core. And that, to me, that means in and out. And what can we do? And yes, there's going to have to be collaboration with the county and with the state. But I think we have to lead it. So a definite yes to this, but I want to make sure that it includes everything we need, both directions, not just the S-curves, but all signalized intersection strategies, roundabout strategies, bridges, tunnels. I'm not advocating for any of these ideas yet, but I want them all to be considered and really thought about carefully so that we can get this right and make as many improvements as we possibly can.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions.
Do you want me to respond to that real quick? That's really what I need the traffic study for, and like, what are those limits? What are we looking at? I think the reason that this is designated for in-city design, I think once we get outside the city near the roundabout, I mean, Lynn and I we know a lot about this, but we would need some kind of CDOT, county, there would have to be a bigger process through that. And we could use EOTC as an example, but we need a different path. And so I really need to understand, what is council's direction? Where are your limits? What is it that you want to accomplish? Is it focusing on single occupied vehicles is something that you should really think about, because that's changed from the past. We've been a transit-based, where we're trying to improve the pieces to get people out of vehicles and use the good services that we have. So in the next couple months, really think about, where do you want that balance? Do you want us to really pursue the transit side of things, which is what it's historically been? Or is it really trying to improve the vehicle congestion? And it can be done both ways, but
I'm
I
gonna answer
understand
your
what you're
questions,
saying.
and I also have one question for you. Why can't we do a study past the roundabout?
The study can be done.
That's what I'm asking for right
Okay.
now, to be
And
clear.
I think that's what we're gonna do in
And-
January
and
with Jen and.
depending on what the study says, yes, I understand there will need to be collaboration.
Yes.
And then to answer your question, we need to do both. We need to improve the traffic flow for single occupancy vehicles. We need to also improve transit. They are not mutually exclusive. There is a certain amount of traffic that is never gonna get out of their single occupancy vehicles 100% of the time. And I would venture to guess that includes every one of us sitting in this room. 100% of the time on public transit doesn't work for me. I doubt it works for everybody. So that being said, let's make the traffic flow as good as it possibly can be. We're not solving traffic here. There's never gonna be no traffic, but I think we can improve upon it, and the amount of traffic that we have now is unsustainable. So, yes, we can improve transit, and we can also improve traffic flow.
Sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
no problem.
my questions were related to this, the study that's cited on page 153 of the budget book, and also the second bullet point about S-curves and infrastructure. So the results, when do we expect the results from that study that's cited, and what's the time frame for any improvements? And what's the projected impact from those studies and the S-curve infrastructure work? Those are all questions that I had about, waiting for the outcome of the study. When do we see that study? And I thought the scope of it was pretty good, and I think it was focused a lot on to get us information on the S-curves. What I needed to know is it possible to have an entrance to Aspen through the S-curves? If so, what infrastructure, what land acquisitions do we need to soften those curves? And I was thinking that that's what the study that we had funded is going to come up with, and I was hoping that you could tell us when the time frame on, was that Q2, or when are we going to see that?
It's at the end of Q1 when they'd first, it might be a January if we can move it quicker. We're doing the bridge assessment first, and that's coming up after Thanksgiving. The piece that you're talking about with the S-curves, they're getting our existing information. They have that, they're working on it. Now remember, we've done a lot of these studies. So really we're incorporating a lot of this existing information into what I had surveyed for a project in 2018. And so we're gonna try to give you the most questions we can by utilizing those existing studies. And yes, that is part of the part that you gave consent for, is to look specifically at that S-curve, if we can use that across the bridge. And there's a component of the bridge, what has to be done with the bridge? How do you phase that? How can it gracefully be lifted and replaced? There's a lot of discussions to be had with that in the next 6 months.
And I don't want to forget, remember, we have the least amount of jurisdiction of anyone, and we're the ones spending the money. So I don't want to mislead the council or the community that all these studies are going to result in a change for the FHWA or CDOT. You could spend all this money and nothing changes. I want to be really clear about that. Where you have control is up to that bridge for the most part, where CDOT will probably be more lenient with us along the management of the traditional Main Street section. But when we get closer to that bridge, it is definitely not our say that will carry much weight. They'll consider our request and they'll do it seriously, but I just caution you, we're doing a lot of study outside of the mandated federal process, which means we'll probably redo the studies within the federal mandated process if the council chooses to evaluate one of these further for consideration, because you won't be able just to say, hey, could we do this instead? That's not how the federal process works.
I'm comfortable taking that risk for this study, and again, I'm asking everyone else at the table for the support to make sure that this is holistic and that it's all-encompassing so that we can have some ideas that would work using the existing alignment and improving the existing alignment.
That's what Pete said he was doing. I don't need, I'd only anticipated to the airport or the ABC. I didn't really need to go to Brush Creek.
I'm fine with that too. Someone brought up Brush Creek.
But yeah, I think what I've heard is what we want to get back. So right now, I'm supportive of the direction that we're going.
And just to have some awareness, I expect that the timeline that we are on versus the timeline of the county engineer's availability are different, because the county engineer's office will be focused on its contributions to the airport layout plan, which will then direct their willingness for changes in that section of Highway 82 after the airport layout plan's adopted. And we're about probably 18 months away from that decision from the FAA.
So just to be clear, Pete, Tori's supportive of this, I'm supportive of this. Will the study include inbound congestion improvement recommendations also? I want to make sure we get this
Your
right.
decision point on that going forward is going to be done at a work session in January, but we will present that option based on your comments and what that looks like, the cost, the study.
The cost for the study.
Yeah, so right now, it's not in the scope we have in front of you for that we're asking you to consider spending on. I think that we need to have some conversations, quite frankly, with the county about whether they're a willing participant, because if they're not at a place they can from a capacity standpoint, it will, I don't know, I'm looking at them, but my thinking is that if the county engineer doesn't have capacity on the timeline we're hopeful for, we're really going to struggle to produce you any work product that is to a point it could be presented to the EOTC.
I just want to make sure that we do this right the first time. I obviously am very supportive of this. I want to expand it to make sure that we get it right. I understand all the constraints. We need to be the leaders on this one. Our traffic problem is unsustainable. Yes, we will be taking more than our fair share of responsibility for it, but no one else is doing it. So I want to be the ones to do it.
You're going to come back to us in January for that direction.
I will. I can't wait.
Great. Well, you're going to have to.
Yes, thank you. All right, first one we should talk about is what's considered fleet transportation. That's replacements for our Car-to-Go program. So those are replacement vehicles. This is probably going to be a truck. And so this is really a popular program in the Car-to-Go. This is the funding to be able to produce that. The Ruby Park maintenance, this is the mechanical systems, this is the green roof, this is just keeping the building going. And the bus stop improvement plan is really along similar lines. It's the repair of the bus stops, the considerable maintenance, the snow removal, it's all that stuff combined in, and those are what those funds are used for, and usually those are pretty tight.
I had a question about the Car-to-Go.
Me too.
First of all, the Fusion is 2014, has 10,000 miles, 11,000 miles. If it's not being used, do we need to replace it? It seems like if there's no demand for it, why put the money into buying a new one?
I can answer that for you. What we've heard from our membership is that they would like to utilize a different type of vehicle. What we've found is that vehicle doesn't work terribly well in the winter. It just hasn't been something that our members have liked to use. Certainly, if council's direction is to not replace it, we'll follow that. I think if we do replace it, we'll replace it most likely. There's a RAV4 vehicle we've been looking at that is electric. We would probably replace with that. That's what our members are telling us they want, is something a little larger and a little more snow-ready. And I believe our plan would be to provide that car to another department that can utilize it in a different way. And then the truck, same thing, very popular with our members, and we would replace a truck with hopefully an electric model. We're looking at a few options right now.
Yeah, and again, it's older, but it's under the mileage.
Yes.
And I've driven that a few times, and it's a sweet vehicle.
You like it, it's fast, but our members have definitely let us know that it's not their favorite vehicle for what they're using our cars for.
Are you seeing program growth? Are you seeing new memberships?
That program's interesting in that it tends to stay pretty steady at around anywhere between, say, 230 and 250 members, and they turn over, and then we get a new one almost the same day. So we've always found that interesting, that it tends to stay pretty steady with that membership, and a pretty even split between locals, second homeowners, business memberships, things like that. It stays pretty steady.
But membership is open, people can join?
Yes.
Okay, great.
What's the stereotypical use case for a trip?
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of depends on the member type. So our business members, you see them go to Snowmass a lot. And then our residential members, they might use the truck to move furniture, for example. A lot of trips to Mid-Valley for grocery shopping, and often it depends on the member. But they're relatively short. You don't see people, and we discourage people taking the cars for a road trip for a long period of time, that type of thing. So relatively short and pointed, like task-oriented.
And how many total vehicles are there in this program?
We have 9 right now. 1 is a spare, and the rest are in service. And we are experimenting with 1 is electric, the rest are hybrid.
And average mileage accrued on each vehicle per year?
They really vary. On the heavy side is, say, the truck and the SUVs, and then our cars can be lower, anywhere from 10,000 miles to, I think our highest vehicle right now is in the 90s, and that's one of our SUVs or trucks. So they really vary. They are
1,000 miles. Like, do we have a statistic on like what across the fleet, what the number of miles is on average per vehicle?
per year.
Per year.
Per year, I would say. I can get that back to you, but they're relatively low per year. You'll notice that these cars are, as Ward noted, mostly older but low mileage, and I think it just is reflective of the types of trips people are taking.
Yeah, I mean, along the lines of what Tori, I think, was getting at, is if we're gonna do this, I think we should have good utilization of it, and is there some impediment to use that we're not thinking about? I don't know, but.
Bill, I've used it a couple, 3 times, 4 times, and it's a piece of cake to use it. The program is really smooth.
Right, so is it like about educating people that it exists, or how inexpensive it is, or how easy it is to sign up, or how easy it is to check out a car? I don't know. I've never used it. I have a car, but,
I have a car, but I don't have a pickup anymore, so I've used the pickup, and it's really
right, so
handy
maybe
for
the
that.
fleet mix, if that's the stereotypical use case, is people need to go to Glenwood to buy a mattress, great, we should have all pickup trucks then, right? Like, I think maybe just some noodling on it. Yeah, I'm fine with the fleet replacements as long as there's thoughtfulness behind what we're replacing.
And we are
And
looking at
there's an
that.
app for it, too.
I think what you're hearing on a policy level is that we are supportive of the Car2Go program, and we'd love to see it grow and be more successful. We support your request at this time, but we all like it. We all like the idea of it.
Oh, parking's next. In summary of the transportation, we have a busy year ahead of us, and a lot of it's going to be focused on the entry and really improving the programmatic pieces of the parking department. or transportation.
You know, I'll use this opportunity to just say what I always say when we talk about this stuff is like, we just need to identify our target audience, you know? As Bill was saying, you know, mass transit's great, we all support it. It doesn't work all the time for everybody. As we try to refine what we do and increase our mass transit ridership and lessen the single occupant vehicles, we just need to identify who that is, you know? I was looking at some ridership numbers and some traffic counts that you provided us in the information-only memo, I believe in July. And it's still, you know, it's who are we talking about? You know, we've done such a great job going back years and years of identifying the skiers that need to get between Aspen and Snowmass or Buttermilk and Highlands as well. But, you know, that's a user group that we clearly define. We knew that use was out there, so we put a lot of energy, effort, and monies into it, and as well as SkiCo. And I want to acknowledge them and RAFTA for their efforts. But then this next, where we're trying to get more juice out of the orange, is going to be harder and harder. So we just need to keep really figuring out who we're targeting. It's kind of similar to the car-to-go question we were just talking about is, you know, what's the fleet mix to serve the most people and get people to be utilizing that program? Anyway, I just want to throw that out there because it's just, we're all really trying to improve our roadways and our congestion and our mass transit riding and lessen vehicles. And in order to do that, we're going to have to get kind of specific about what we're doing and who we're targeting. Anyway, other comments here for transportation summary?
I'll ask a really quick question. I got an email today, I feel like the other council members did too, from a company called Rove. And I was wondering if you were familiar with them and if you could speak to them at all.
We submitted an info memo with some of the information for them that should be coming out next week for you.
Okay, sounds good.
This is a WeCycle competitor? No.
WeCycle. No, they called themselves like a first and last mile. They sound more like a downtowner that you pay for, I think.
Yeah, it sounded like they had some different types of electric vehicles they were promoting, but it's very similar to Downtowner.
And I didn't see that email, but I was going to be sending you two an email that there is a gentleman that's coming in town that would like to talk to you about transportation and transit modes and opportunities. He'll be here, I think, October 9th to the 16th or something, so I'm going to connect you guys. Parking.
Parking.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
You can stay if you want. She's representing parking tonight also.
Never mind.
As you can see, the majority of the people in the parking department are on the ground. They're out there doing the work in the field. It's really important to know as a department that the one piece that we're really focused on in the last year is increasing our service. They're the first person from the city that people usually see, whether it's tourist or local. And I think we really need to bridge the gap and really bring a welcoming environment through the use of better service. I think an important message out of this for the community is really the vast majority of our revenues come from on-street parking. And so that's the payment at the meters, pay by phone, or text to pay. That's the majority of our revenues. And so it's important to know just behaviorally, we're trying to increase that compliance without relying on revenues from ticketing and citations.
How much of the on-street parking comes from like construction and like full day rental type of thing? Is a percentage?
It's a percentage. I can get you that exact percentage, unless Pete knows it off.
I can actually help you because I did look this up earlier today. We estimate about $500,000 coming from revenue for construction parking permits.
Thanks.
Expenditures. I think the most important expenditure for the public to know and council to know is that we support the transportation department through our revenues. And in this case, as you can see the transfers out, that goes to some of it goes to the transportation department to provide the transit services. And I think that balance is really unique to a community, and I hope we continue that. So this one, again, is similar to 82. It's an anticipation fund of what we think is coming. And I think through 2020, and I know that you've heard from the businesses, the workforce has changed, and we've got to adapt a little bit as a city on how that workforce is changing. And one of the ways that I'm anticipating the direction that you go through this study process, and don't forget, the study process is with the community. It should have a good outreach. Is really starting to utilize technology. Now, what technology, I don't know. As you know, that we did a lab for the sensors just to assure that it works, and that's really how this budget was created. If we were going to spread that out throughout the entire downtown core, you know, what does that cost? And, you know, there's other options out there. And really, you know, once you make the policy decisions, I think this part starts to come into play a little bit more. And so this fund is really balanced to provide that management piece that we're probably going to need in the future.
This is for the sensor program?
This could be sensors, it could be cameras, it could be different additionals of how we manage. The number is based off a sensor or camera. What I did is I took one block of what it cost us and I multiplied it throughout the core.
I don't get what this accomplishes. I think that's the part that I'm missing.
So what this would accomplish is we are short-staffed. Generally, parking is a department that's going to be short-staffed. In order to provide the service that's really needed in order to maintain compliance, and that's really what you want as a city, is you want that compliance, you want turnover. You're going to have to use other means, because I'm just not going to be able to send two people out there, not because you don't want to, just we don't have the people. And so how are you going to manage that if you don't have those people available? And it's getting more complicated to hire. And so this is going to offset that so that we can still provide the services to the community even without. And so the way that it looks is the job changes a little bit for the operators and the ambassadors we have, in that they're managing contracts and technologies and then doing the on-foot thing to provide the on-street service so that people are visible, because really a service they do provide is being out there answering questions. I mean, you'd be surprised how much that they talk to the tourists and really provide them in directions. Does that kind of help what I'm thinking there?
I'm going to jump in here even more specific. So what it is that this data lets us know where there should be higher targeted enforcement for failure to have turnover. That's one of the key pieces of it. So we know this block, we need to check more frequently because it has a higher tendency to have violators of the 4-hour rule. That's one example. Another example is we get questions from the council all the time in trying to balance business tenant concerns about how the parking in front of their business establishment is being utilized. So this will let us know turnover data. How frequently is that spot actually turning over? And if it's not turning over frequently, it lets us start understanding, well, who is it who's parking there? Are they customers? Are they employees of the Corps? Should there be a different alternative to help inform your policy making? It affects when you want to give free permits to lodging, because how are those lodging permits being utilized? This helps us track that more frequently and understand it. Are they using that permit just on one vehicle over and over and over? Or are they rotating it through vehicles? Are they rotating it through guests? All questions we get asked that we do not have the data set to support you in.
She answered that a lot better than I did.
I have reservations about this. I've shared them before. I have reservations about this. I don't think this is necessary now, but I get what you're saying about where we're going. And if this was a $2 million investment for where we're going, I get it. I don't know that I have the same vision of downtown as maybe you do. So I'm really lukewarm on this. This is one that I have to trust that where you see the department and where you see this helping you pays dividends in the long run, but I just don't see it. I don't see it, but.
I feel like it's pretty easy to speculate on some of the questions that Sarah mentioned, like where are the 4-hour limits being exceeded regularly? I think I could tell you that pretty easily. I'm no expert on that, but I think it's near the gondola and near real estate brokerage offices. Like, I really don't think that's rocket science, right? So, I mean, I get that you want to have data to back up policy making, but given how small of a community we are and how easy it is to sort of like get a gut feel on what some of our bigger parking issues are, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this expenditure.
What is the 300,000 next year? What does that get you through?
So that would be sort of to get it started into design late in the year. Like, we're planning on going through the study and figuring out exactly what you want, and then just kind of building it in for next year so that we can continue the momentum. It's a very slow start. It's not something that we're going to try to do in 1 year. It's going to be spread out over 3.
Have you come to us in a work session and kind of given us the whole vision?
Well, I don't think the vision's complete because you don't have the short-term transit study done. But you authorized and funded the pilot over on Hopkins, and you also have authorized similar technology to be utilized in the parking garage. You just approved that contract last week. So we feel like we've been signaled to start employing more technology to have more accurate data for your decision-making. And so if that's a change, we just need to hear that from the council, and your change would be by not, by pulling this out of the budget and not funding it. I think that, I think this issue of hiring this role will continue to be a challenge for us. Just like SKICO doesn't hit full staff for years now. This is a department that I think will struggle to hit full staffing on. And so we're trying to remove some of the manual labor from the duties.
And I get that, and I also understand that that's the part that I wouldn't know, right? I think Bill and I are, maybe have eyes on this more than most people, where I live and where he works, and which is right around the corner from this intersection. So I'd have to tell you that, from my point of view, I would love more information. I'm not supportive of this. I don't want to pull it out right now, but I would love more information. I'd love to see, after we get through some study, to have all those things that you guys know that I just don't.
Now, if you told us that you could replace parking ambassadors entirely with some kind of technology that automatically mails you a parking ticket once you go over, that's something that I would have a different conversation on. I have no idea whether that technology exists or not. But like that, for me, it's like, we can't hire for these positions. They cost us this much money. We're going to spend X dollars in capital, and our operating cost is going to go down by this much. It's a little big brothery, but it's a conversation worth having.
Well, the out years would be any kind of outcomes from the studies. You're looking at 1.6 million for out years and 300K for basically getting the information that might inform those out years for.
No, the 300,000 is for design.
Yeah, you might have questions on the technologies and pieces like that, or whatever it is that we come out with the study. What I want to do is be able to go back and provide you the information to make that decision if it's needed, and start the design of what that would look like so that you have real costs and what it would look like, and there's probably even a public piece to that.
Are we still looking at parking as a discourage parking by increasing rates to decrease the amount of traffic in the core?
That's a policy decision that that you need to decide as a council. Are we in line? We'll have that set up for you so that you can compare it to other cities. Our downtown core, A lot of discussions about dynamic pricing. Are the hours correct? These are all things we want the answers to, because there is improvements that you can make in that. And I will say that just in the public piece, we got to balance that out so that it doesn't keep people from coming to Aspen.
You can't keep people from coming to Aspen.
I disagree.
Cannot keep people from coming to Aspen. You really? What do you got?
I think there's just a lot of people who live, who don't live in the core, who might make a decision to turn right on 82 instead of left on 82 kind of thing. I'm gonna go eat in Basalt instead of Aspen.
I'm just saying it because it's a concern that I've heard from the businesses, and you were sitting right next to me with some of that, right?
Yeah, like I said, hey, we're not pulling this out now. You have two-fifths up here that have questions and concerns around this. I would love to get more information. I'm gonna say what I said before. This summer was really great. I thought this summer was great. And I didn't have the same comments. As a matter of fact, one of the comments that I had from somebody was that there's always a parking spot available. Why won't you let us stay in it longer than 4 hours? Et cetera. Anyway,
It took a lot of staff this summer.
Another day, yeah. It's conversation
We
for
did
another day.
prioritize it this summer, but that took us out of some other areas. right?
Created a lot of other problems in neighborhoods.
And I appreciate it, and that's the part that I don't know. So I would love to have a work session and talk more about this as it goes forward. It's just not, this isn't, this isn't me.
Our follow-up plan will be, we start to have a conversation in January on Highway 82 and Main Street. This, I think, did someone send me a request for a Q1 check-in with council on this, on the short-term transit study? I can't remember. No, because you're in vendor selection right now.
No, we've started the project.
Okay.
And so that would be, I think it was late in Q1 is our schedule,
Okay.
spring for that first council check-in, and that's after we do some public outreach.
Alrighty, so the next time we're talking about this is March, April.
Yeah, it could be great. This is out of my,
You'll love it, Tori.
love it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Your lips to God's ears.
Okay, some of the expenditures, license plate recognition. This includes both the upgrade in technology and the replacement of the Go-4s, which is the little automobile things that look like golf carts. They are due for replacement. They're starting to break down a little bit. But what's really interesting about this, and just the years that we've had this, we were one of the first ones really to kind of use these, and I'm excited after talking about some of the vendor about the license plate recognition improvements. What happens a lot of times and why we have errors is the recognition between 0 and O. The different license plate have reflections, and they're starting to improve that technology quite a bit. Right now, it's still pretty cumbersome on staff to have to type it in and check it in, and this technology is improving that.
You're talking about that for parking enforcement?
It's really heavily used in the residential. It is enforcement. It's the LPRs. You go, they're driving their car through the blocks, and it reads the license plate, dings it if it hasn't paid, and then they can get out.
Did we talk about this in terms of some other stuff related to what
Yeah,
happened out
so,
in Snowmass?
so this is completely separate from the conversation of using LRP that has come up with the EOTC. It's the same technology, very different applications. I would say here, the thing is, it's like, this is the way we've done parking enforcement for a long time. This is particularly important about the permit registrations in the residential zones, things like that, that end up in less error in enforcement.
Oh, it's great. No, it was a big changeover and a big help.
Yeah, residential has changed with this technology.
Yeah, anyway.
Fleet parking, that is the sweepers, the pieces that are clean the garages and that equipment. And I won't get into details below, but obviously we striped the core for parking. This year the rain kind of hit us hard at the wrong times, and then the others are the maintenance for the garage and the caulking. Thank you, Council and Mr. Mayor. In summary, we have similar to transportation. We have a lot of policy questions coming up in the next year. As you can tell, there's a lot of discussions to be had about how we manage parking in the future, and we're looking forward to having those discussions with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Pete and Lynn.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Matt.
That was our last item on our agenda this evening. As always, I want to thank GrassRoots. Have a wonderful evening, and we will be back next Tuesday. Are we no meeting Monday, or are we meeting Monday?
We're meeting Monday, just for a reminder, open house tomorrow. Who's planning on going to the Armory open house?
Right after the option meeting.
After. Okay. So that's helpful, we're just making sure we don't have a noticing issue. And then Thursday, you have EOTC. Aspen is the host of that meeting. It will be hybrid. And then a regular meeting, a work session on Monday.
So never mind, GrassRoots. We'll see you tomorrow, and Thursday, and Monday, and next Tuesday, and then